I'd like to call to order the Dublin City Council meeting for Monday, September the 9th. Would you call the roll, Ann, please?
Yes, Ms. Aludo.
Here.
Mr. Keenan.
Here.
Mr. Bosa.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
And Mr. Reiner.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would love to have the Grand Leprechauns come forward. And what's the feminine form of leprechaun? Anybody know? Let's please come forward for the Pledge of Allegiance. All sizes, shapes, and ages. All right, ready?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Tonight we have in special presentations and recognitions. We have Wreaths Across America. And the spokesman tonight will be AC Strip. Ace, please.
Thank you, Mr. Reiner, and pleasure to be back here where I spent many an evening. So my name is AC Strip, a former resident of Dublin, which I miss. I'm here on behalf of the former Grand Leprechauns of Dublin, and I am not here to ask for money. Isn't that refreshing? In 2013, our good neighbor and friend Oz Keplin introduced Dublin to a program which is now known as Wreaths Across America, which is to honor veterans in graves in our community, many going back many, many years, and many going back who have no one to remember them. So it began with Oz Keplin. Oz, would you stand up and be recognized?
Thanks, Ace.
Thank you.
Hey, John. I'm here to torment you like I did 6 years on the board.
Welcome.
So after a number of
Nice
years,
seeing you again.
Don Piuno and his sidekick, Mayor Rosansky, soon to be Township Trustee Rosansky, reignited the flame and single-handedly between the two of them renewed the project, raising the needed funds. That was last year. Last year, 371 wreaths were put on Dublin veteran graves with the good help of our local Boy Scout Troop 299. Now the Grand Leprechauns have come forward to take ownership of this program for future years. We will honor deceased veterans going back some 250 years in time. We'll get back to that in a minute. So you know there are some 1,650 communities in this nation that maintain the program of Wreaths America, and I think you can be proud that Dublin will be one of them. The date will be in December 14th to be specific, at the Dublin Cemetery. We will have a speaker who is the commander of the Ohio National Guard, Major General Steve Markovich. We ask you simply to give us your endorsement. Any person in the city or outside the city who wants to participate, the wreaths are $15 per grave site. What we ask tonight is that perhaps a resolution endorsing our efforts, and if you'll permit me, I will pass out a photograph which may be of interest to you because we did not know this grave site existed. It was taken by Don Piuno, and this goes back 255 years.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks, Ace.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yes.
please.
Thank you, City Council. Thank you, the Leprechauns. Thank you for 36 years in living in Dublin, Ohio, Muirfield Village. And finally, I want to thank two deceased wives who told me to do it. AC Strip has been my neighbor for 23 years. When he moved in, let me tell you something. I thought about it, and I says, what I should do is go over there and introduce myself. Went over there, rang the doorbell, looked up in the sky, and there was this big Amazon. I looked at her, I says, I want to welcome you. She said, I don't live here. So I ran down the street, and my wife didn't see me 2 days afterwards. Thank you, Ace. Ace is one of the greatest. I got to tell you that. He was a great neighbor for 23 years. When we both were, I should say, I was a widower and he was a widower, we used to sit on the deck, smoke cigars, and drink wine. And I will tell you, he's one of the greatest, okay? He did a pro bono for me one time, and I tried to feed his fish, so it was reciprocal. But anyway, let me talk about Reads Across America. I had an office on Riverside Drive for about 16 years, and an office building, as you say, and I just sold it. When I sold it, that was my retirement date. I was 83 at the time. I'm 88 today. And I came across a program, a Reads Across America, that was introduced to me by the VA director of the county of Franklin County. And he says, we've done this program for about 10 years, and we're looking for somebody else to do it in Dublin, Ohio. And I raised my hand. I says, I'm in. And so in 2013, I think it was 2013, we did it for the city of Dublin. The previous year, I went to the small cemetery on Riverside Drive, and you know where that small cemetery is. It was a little controversial at the time because they neglected it. The city of Columbus neglected it, and all you saw were weeds. So I went over there, and I saw 4 graves that looked like they were veterans of the wars of America. And I got involved. So the next year, I decided to do it. And I called the American Legion. I called a trumpet man. I called a bagpipe man. I called a minister who happened to be renting from me in my office. And I says, we're going to do Reads Across America. What is Reads Across America? Started in Maine about 20, 30 years ago. A wholesale florist had these wreaths, and he had an excess of them, and he couldn't get rid of them. So he said, what should we do to his staff? And they said, let us give it to the cemetery in Washington called Arlington National Cemetery. And from that today, there are millions of wreaths that are presented on graves of all servicemen, all from the Revolutionary War through Afghanistan. I had a brother that was wounded in the Second World. I had 2 uncles who were killed in the First World War. Unfortunately, they were from the German army. I'm a first-generation American. I served in the Air Force for 4 years. 3 of those years was with the Strategic Air Command, 93rd Bombardment Squadron and Wing, and we flew planes, B-47s, with nuclear weapons aboard, 1 bomb. We had 2,006 planes, and it was commanded by a general who happened to graduate, may I say this word, Ohio State University. His name was Curtis Lee May. Do you know that, John? I knew, okay. Yes, he was one of my heroes. Okay. Let me tell you another story, and this is a little bit off the thing about Wreaths Across America. When President Kennedy became the CEO of America, a guy called Khrushchev decided this is an ideal time. This kid, his new president, is 43 years old. And he says, I'm going to test him. So he took a couple ships and he brought missiles to Cuba. President Kennedy said to him, he says, okay, get him out of here within a week, or start preparing in a week. He says, I've got 2006 B-47 bombers with one bomb that will fly over your country, and you better respond quickly. And the reason why they withdrew were 2006 planes with nuclear weapons aboard. We flew around Russia 24 hours a day during the Korean War and during the Cold War. I am a first-generation American, and I love America because I saw bombing in Munich where half of that city was dissolved by American planes. My grandfather was killed by strafing of American planes when he rode the tracks from Berlin to Stettin. My background is high in the military area. So Wreaths Across America is very important to me, as it's important to you as Americans. That's my conviction. I'm very strong, America, because I saw what it looked like in other countries. I was not allowed to see my relatives in Eastern Germany because I was with the Strategic Air Command, 93rd Bombardment Group, and they would make a big deal if I crossed into that section of the country. I have gone off the track a bit because I don't like reading from script. This is the first time I had a script with me. As a city manager, you know, hey, I know a little about you. I'm not kidding you one bit, General. I salute you. But the little start of the company from Maine now has extended to thousands of cities across America. We are honoring them. And I, as well as the leprechauns that I met this evening, want your endorsement. There's a guy called John Reinhardt who I asked to make a talk at the first one. And John, hey, did a good job. I donated all those flags. Do you still have them? Okay. That's all I have to say. I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. And this being my first addressing, I should say, a city council in 41 years, I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah, you did a good job.
And when you know the council like I did, and I got to tell you, when they left service, hey, good suggestion. We did a roast on every councilman. Okay? And you know what kind of roast it was? Ever hear of a guy who's a singer and he did the roasts on TV? Dean Martin.
Dean Martin, that's right.
Yes. And one of the former city managers, his name was Tom Bay, he said, there goes our roast. I thank you, and may God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Hey, Oz, thank you. Thanks for your historical perspective on an important period of our history and the appreciation that all of you guys in Wreaths Across America show our service people. I'd like to make a motion for a resolution for council to endorse the Grand Leprechauns in their efforts with Wreaths Across America. They're not asking for any funding, just our endorsement.
I'll second that motion, John.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
John, I might note my cousin in Westerville, Worthington, has been involved in this program for some years, and I know I've helped her out there, and I'm looking forward to helping you folks personally and even corporately as well. So it's a great program, it's patriotic, and it's something we need to do. So
Yeah.
thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Let's all see if we can show up on December the 14th this year. And it was a really moving speech last year, Ace. Just well done. So thank you for what you're doing for our service people and those who gave their lives and commitment to our country. Thank you very much. Next item is the AEP Dublin West Innovation District Improvement Project Update. And Megan, you want to lead us into that, please? Hey, you guys, leave a pot of gold, will you? Since you're leprechauns.
Good evening, members of council. Before I introduce the presenter from AEP this evening, I would like to provide a little bit of background for context for his presentation. In early 2017, AEP reached out to staff and communicated a need to reinforce the electric system in the Dublin area due to the age of the existing transmission infrastructure, the local load, and a specific customer's planned ramp up in the West Innovation District. Dublin staff held a series of meetings with AEP transmission representatives to obtain a clear understanding of the need for the system upgrades and potential options to increase reliability and capacity in Dublin before mid-2019, which was AEP's planned schedule at that time in 2017. AEP investigated a range of possibilities, including overhead circuits, underground circuits, and a combination thereof, between the existing Dublin station located on the west side of Emerald Parkway south of Shire Rings Road and a future Amlin Sumac station proposed to be located near the customer in the West Innovation District. And/or they had an option between the existing Dublin station and the existing Sawmill station located on the west side of Sawmill Parkway near Summit View Road. In 2017, again, AEP was proposing a double circuit 138 kV transmission line or kilovolt transmission line with a few variations of route alternatives. There were numerous factors, including the fact that it was a double circuit at the time, and complexities associated with each of the options that were under consideration. AEP representatives presented to City Council at 2 different meetings that summer, before and after a public meeting that they held in July of 2017. So you may recall some of those discussions back then. Following those events in the summer of 2017, AEP revisited the project and reevaluated the need and options. They also continued coordination with the specific customer to determine their future needs and the schedule for their ramp up. Throughout 2018, staff checked in with AEP periodically, but there weren't many updates throughout the year until December, when AEP informed us that they had taken a step back from the project, reevaluated their plans, and determined that a single circuit 138 kV transmission line, rather than a double circuit that they had previously planned, would be built between the Dublin and the Amlin Sumac stations. AEP staff is now at a point in the project where they are reaching back out to the public for input on the proposed route, and we requested that they provide an update to City Council in advance of the public meeting that they're planning. So with that, I would like to introduce Joe Demery. He's the project outreach specialist with AEP, and he will provide an overview of AEP's proposed project and discuss a public meeting that they will be hosting on September 23rd.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So as Megan said, it's been some time since we provided an update to council. So wanted to touch base again. And Megan, it may be beneficial if we just start with the map. I know I said the top earlier, but just to give a quick overview of where we're talking about in the city. So this is your West Innovation District. Originally, we had some routes proposed for the area to support economic development. Based on some comments that we received from the community and from the city, we kind of took a step back to reevaluate. Part of that evaluation, we determined that we can take off the second circuit of this line and have enough support for the load with a single circuit. We also have proposed a few different adjustments to our routes than we proposed at our open house in 2017. So wanted to touch base with the council, make sure that you're aware. We have sent letters to the community inviting the entire project area to attend an open house on Monday, September 23rd. We're hoping for good turnout so we can get feedback from everybody in this project area about different development plans, whether they have a preference. Tell them a little bit about what this process looks like, what construction is going to look like, what type of poles we're going to use for our power line, and et cetera. So that's kind of a high level of where this project is taking place. I have paper copies of it. This is our project fact sheets also up on our website of what the structures are going to look like, typical height that we'd recommend for this type of power line, the right-of-way width that we would need to secure from private landowners. So there's a picture of the power line. It's a steel single-pole structure. It's going to be single circuit. One of our routes, is, as you saw, is proposed on the north side of Shire Rings. Continues until it hits about the Cosgrave Park area and then heads north to our ambulance substation. The other route continues on Shire Rings and turns north at Eiderman Road. There's another adjustment, I guess, just south of Cosgrave Park that we have the potential to go on the south side of Shire Rings there. Following the open house, we're going to be taking in comments, probably be meeting with the city, I would assume on a couple different occasions, going over the comments, going over any feedback that the city has, and then we'll have to file an application with the Ohio Power Siting Board for this power line, and that's planned for January. It's called a letter of notification, so it's one of their accelerated applications. They have a 90-day review period. So following that, we hope to start construction next fall and then wrap up in summer of 2021. So I don't know if there are any questions. Wanted to give at least a high-level overview before you started getting maybe questions, because we sent letters out to everybody, and that you have a face for the project and my contact information in case there's any question that you can shoot my way.
You want to give us the date again, September 14th, is that correct?
September 23rd.
23rd?
Monday.
And where would that be?
That is going to be at the community hall at the rec center
Okay.
off Post Road.
Thank you.
And the public is invited to attend between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m. So there's no formal presentation. We'll have easels with poster boards spread around the hall. They'll kind of be explaining the process. Then we'll have an area in the back where we'll have detailed maps. So anybody from the community that comes will be able to zoom in on their exact property, see what the impact is in their area. Then we'll also have another table where they'll come and fill out comment cards on any feedback that they can give us.
Jane, do you have some questions?
I do have some questions. Because they're going to have to be above-ground lines, and because of their impact visually, I wanted to ask you, and I don't know anything about what transmission pole carries what kind of line, but I noticed that last year, or maybe it was in 2017, New Albany had a transmission line that AEP put up, and I read about it in one of the business journals, and it's this one. And I'm wondering, this is a much more, I'll pass this around, a much more artistic transmission line that has a much better visual impact, aesthetically looks better. Is this transmission line capable of utilizing this kind of a pole?
Is this voltage capable?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is this is an option for us. I guess what I'm asking is,
Yeah.
I mean, between the two aesthetically, New Albany asked for this, and I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that we would be able to have something much more attractive than what's there now?
Potentially. So if you look at that picture, the conductors are spread out a little bit more, so it would widen the right-of-way that we would need. And we really prefer to minimize the impact, minimize the right-of-way that we need to acquire. That's something I can have our engineers look into to see if that's a possibility. I know the single pole structure is our preference, given this type of area, but I'm happy to ask them to look into that.
Well, I wouldn't have given it much thought, except that I had seen that it was used somewhere else.
Sure.
And because it does give a better look, and this is an area that we're trying to develop to look really
quite attractive, and I just thought I'd just bring it up for a matter of discussion. I haven't even mentioned it to Megan at all. I just happened to run across this in the last couple of days in reading the board pack, so.
Yeah. No,
I
I'm happy
appreciate-
to have our teams and our engineers that are, that's a little bit above my head.
Right.
But I'm happy to get some details.
Sure,
on
well, I appreciate
why or
you
why not.
entertaining, and I just bring it out just for a matter of information.
Yeah.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Sure.
Council? Go ahead.
Thank you, John. So remind us, if you would, if you'd go back to the map, please, what really are, in this information session that we'll be having with residents, are there options as to location on this map, or we've got multiple lines here?
Yeah,
Update us
so if you look at that, we really need to get from A to B, so the two triangles on that map. And really, we just need to choose one path. So there's different options. So everybody that's kind of in this area is invited. So someone that's on a section heading up Eiderman can give a comment, any feedback that they have about their specific property. And then same as Shire Rings to help us narrow down our options to eventually choose a proposed route.
And I see that you have an option to go on alternate sides of Shearings Road, and I know we're making some changes to that road and making some directional modifications. Any impact on, or thoughts about preferable location of this vis-a-vis that? I'm looking at Megan, I guess.
So are we referencing just south of the park on Shire Rings on the west side of this map?
Over by Cosgray.
Yeah.
So we had those discussions, because that is where we start entering the park area. So we asked them to explore both sides of the road. That was our request.
And do we have a sense, one final question, do we have a sense of how many residences versus commercial or rural-type properties are being impacted here?
So the majority of this line is north of Shire Rings. So not very many residential on the north side. They'll still have some visual because it is going to be close to the road, but it'll all be in private easement.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
No, I was just going to ask, Ann, would you just send out either an email or point us to the right place in board pack to where the material is the last time that they came before us? I just think it would help us from a comparison standpoint to see kind of where the conversation began and where it is now, so we can all refresh our memories. I mean, I have some vague memories of what it looked like before, but I'd like to have that documentation so I can do a comparison. Thank you.
Joe, thanks for coming in, and we're
for
going to
having me.
see you on September 23rd at 5:30,
Great.
all right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for
Of
coming in and
course.
sharing with
Thanks.
us this information. Would anyone from council want to remove anything from the consent agenda? Any of the items? No? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So,
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes,
second reading of ordinance 4319.
Authorize provision of certain incentives to Butler Animal Health Holding Company, LLC, to induce it to lease a facility to retain and expand an office and its affiliated entities, associated operations, and workforce, all within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Good evening. I have no changes since Jeremiah introduced this at the last meeting. Just as a reminder, this is a retention of 228 jobs and the addition of 100 jobs. And this is a 9-year, 20% performance incentives on withholdings collected. I do have the CFO of Covetrus North America, Sean Henderson, is here this evening. And I invite him to the podium to say a few words and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Sean.
you guys,
All right.
your time, and thank you for your interest and your consideration and support of Covetrus. So Covetrus is a newly formed business from the spinoff of Henry Schein's animal health business with a company called Vets First Choice. We're a leading animal health provider worldwide. We provide technology solutions, supplies, et cetera, to veterinarians around the globe, really. We serve probably 100,000 vets worldwide. We have about 90%. We touch about 90% of the vets in the United States. We have around 5,500 employees worldwide. As part of the merger, when the companies come together, you're constantly looking at facility planning, employee planning, that kind of stuff. And so, with the lease expiration coming up, and I think Henry Schein Animal Health, formerly Butler, has been in Dublin for, I want to say 20 years or something like that. Been in the current location for 10, and then we were over off of Tuttle Crossing or something, I think, before that. Predates me, but plenty of people there that have been there 20 and 30 years. So, we began reviewing various facility scenarios. We're currently working with the landlord to, kind of finalize the due diligence on the facility on Metro Place. We do value the city of Dublin, Columbus 2020, and Jobs Ohio for ongoing partnership. Wish he was here, but special shout out to Jeremiah. He's great, great to work with, as is the whole Dublin Economic Development Council team. So thank you for your consideration. If you have any questions for me.
So what do you love about having your business here, and is there anything that we could do better for your business?
I love a lot about it. The engagement from the community. I do actually. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce board. See Dana once a month. Margie, I think was back there somewhere. Huh? Oh, she left. Okay. No, just the sense of community is it's really interesting. 'Cause I moved up here from Atlanta about 3 years ago to take this job, and Dublin is it's a great town.
Yeah, we love it here too. What if there's one thing that you could pick that would help your business thrive more, or one thing the city could do better? What would that be?
Just to continue to innovate. I like that Dublin is forward thinking, right? They, whether it's transportation or renovation of certain areas. I know that there's some plans in that Metro Place area, over time, right? You're not looking at what's going on today. You're looking at how to best set it up for tomorrow. So continuing with those plans would be.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So this is headquarters of the organization?
No,
is that right?
our corporate headquarters are in Portland, Maine.
Okay.
But this is this is the headquarters of the North American distribution business, which is the largest business unit. But I mean, the great thing about what we're doing is it's not just going to be that. Part of this project is to turn this also into sort of a shared services organization where you'll have, there'll be accounting and IT and some other sort of administrative roles that are also out of this facility.
Yeah, I spent a little time looking out history of the company here. It is quite a massive organization. It's incredible.
Yes, it is.
And it's wonderful that you're choosing to expand here in Dublin, so we're excited about that, and thank you for that.
You guys were instrumental in that, so I really appreciate it.
Any other comments? No? Yeah, we want to welcome you and thank you for your loyalty and thank you for the positive comments about the community. We do try to get 5 to 7 years ahead on planning on everything, traffic, and it's really nice to hear people mention it, so thank you very much. So you're sort of the cardinal industries of the veterinary world, really, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Vote for the...
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Fox? Mr. Reiner?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Ordinance 4419, first
Accepting.
public reading.
Accepting the annexation of 1.29 plus or minus acres from Jerome Township, Union County to the city of Dublin.
I'll introduce it.
Good evening, council members. Union County Commissioners approved this annexation on May 21st. Under the Ohio Revised Code, the clerk of council is then required to hold the transcript for a period of 60 days. That 60-day waiting period has expired, and so the next step is for council to accept or reject the annexation. Provided City Council accepts the annexation, we intend to file a boundary adjustment petition in order to move the property from Jerome to Washington Township for consistent fire service. The property is within the proposed annexation areas of the community plan and is located in the exclusive Dublin expansion area as defined in the Columbus Water and Sewer Agreements. Staff therefore recommends approval at second reading, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council questions? None? Is there any public testimony from the public? None? And no discussion? Second reading will be September 23rd at that council meeting. Ordinance 4519.
Adopting and enacting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the City of Dublin. Introduction.
I'll introduce it.
The city's codifier, American Legal Publishing, prepares code supplements several times per year that reflect updated state and local legislation. This is primarily a housekeeping measure, and the supplement includes legislation adopted by City Council through June 30th of this year and state legislation current through April 11th. A red line illustrating the revisions and a chart summarizing the state changes have been included in your packet. We recommend approval of the ordinance at the second reading on September 23rd, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
I just had one. When I was going through it, and I know it's hard to make replicate some of this, I had a hard time telling what was redlined, underlined, check marked.
Yes.
I just struggled with that, so I wasn't really necessarily interested in reading all the detail, but there were a couple areas that I was interested in, and I couldn't tell if those check marks means no
Right.
change or update or.
Right. And so we get these documents directly from the codifier, and this is the process. It does look like a rough draft. And so we have asked them to provide more detail, and we did get the chart summarizing the state changes. They have indicated that if we want additional information, they will probably start charging us for that. One thing we have talked about is perhaps doing a final version, getting a final version from them, and then doing our own red line, because it is very confusing. It's their notes, and they're very good and have been our codifier for years and years, but it is a rough draft, and we can try to get a more streamlined version from them or do something on our own.
Again, and I'm not looking to spend a lot of money, but as I look through particularly in the state things, I think it's important that we understand some of those, and I honestly just couldn't make out what I was changing, what was staying. So maybe just from our perspective, just to summarize the ones that we know have a measurable impact, if you will, or that type of thing, maybe that would be useful, not looking for a lot of dollars.
And we have circulated that draft to departments and some of the second, done a double check of a lot of the references. I think the zoning ones are probably the most pertinent, and those are the ones that are the most significant pieces of legislation. So perhaps we can go back and provide more detail on those revisions, just showing the ordinances that they're attributed to.
I guess as needed. I guess you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
If these are housekeeping or whatever, I'm not looking to do that. But again, some of the state ones that I wasn't necessarily following, I would be somewhat interested.
Right.
Or find a way just to make it say, yep, here's a change. However we think that might be useful, I think that would be not trying to make
We can
enormous
definitely
work
look
for
into
anybody.
that.
So,
And
thank
again,
you.
these aren't making any substantive changes at all. They're reflecting legislation that you've passed and that the state has passed.
And again, it's the state stuff that I'm really rather interested in.
Right.
Just, okay, understanding. Thank you.
Is there any public testimony for 4519? Any other comments from council? Second reading, public hearing will be September 23rd, council meeting. Ordinance 4619.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Leading Edge LLC to introduce it to lease a facility to retain and expand an office and its associated operations and workforce, all within the city, and authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Colleen?
Good
you're
evening.
Up to bat again.
I am back. We have been in discussions with Leading Edge about the relocation of their corporate offices. If the 5555 Perimeter Drive address sounds familiar, that will be the new City Hall next year, so we are helping Leading Edge find a new home. They are Dublin headquartered, they are an IT consulting firm, and they fit right in with our targeted industry priority area. This project would retain the 19 employees that they currently have and would add an additional 16. And this deal would require them to sign a 7-year lease someplace else in Dublin. And proposed tonight is a 5-year, 18% performance incentive capped at $90,000. And there is also a retention and relocation grant. And the company will be present at second reading, but I can answer any questions that you have this evening.
Council questions?
Only one, the current lease expires when? Is it the end of this year or?
The lease expires next year, but there are clauses in that we can end it early.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any public comments? Second reading will take place at the September 23rd hearing. Introduction to public hearing resolutions, Resolution 4719.
This is accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission, authorizing the necessary tax levies, certifying them to the county auditor.
I'll introduce it.
Matt?
Good evening, Council. As you are aware, we receive property tax revenue from all properties in the City of Dublin. We're required to allocate these property taxes, how these property taxes are distributed on an annual basis. As part of the adopted 2020 to 2024 CIP, we maintained the same allocation has been in place since the 2010-2014 CIP, with 0.35 mils being distributed to the Parkland Acquisition Fund, 1.4 mils going to the Capital Improvement Tax Fund, and in addition to this inside millage, the city does have voter-approved property tax dedicated to safety operations. It's permanent in nature and has been in place since 1981. Its effective millage is 0.18 mils for residential properties and 0.30 for commercial uses. We're requesting approval of this resolution this evening to maintain the current allocation as approved in the 2020 to 2024 CIP. I'm available for any questions.
Questions from council?
So this is somewhat of a housekeeping and a filing.
It is. We have a deadline with October 1st with the county that we need to file this to certify it.
Great. So as you commented earlier, that really the allocations have stayed pretty consistent for a while. There were some modifications over the years. I looked at the current fund balance for the parks, and I was wondering would it be possible for staff to prepare a bit of a schedule about the additions to that park fund and the acquisitions out of that park fund for the last few years? I think that would be useful context, because not sure at that current balance whether that we need to supplement that as we look into next year. So certainly not a urgency because it's passed now, but it looks like with the addition of the payment of the Kaufman Park that we're about $1.5 million in that park fund. So
Yeah, we have
if I
about
understand that
1.7 million fund balance, as you indicate, and the $200,000 for Kaufman Park will stop. This is the last year of that payment, so we should see that increase in fund balance on an annual basis. We can go back the last 3 to 5 years for parkland acquisition, or did you want to go back further?
No, I think that's,
Okay.
5 years would be great, because I
Okay.
know we've had some conversations, and I know the Public Service Committee had some conversations that we have a maintenance reality with the more parks that, and so when we think about moving some of that to capital funds and some of the maintenance of the parks, it might be in conjunction with that conversation a useful tool or a useful schedule for us to have, because I know that is something that we've talked a fair bit about, and I know that's something staff is working to try to help increase funding for in the operating side of it. So I think that would be useful. So
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Okay, is there any public testimony on Resolution 4719? Any further discussion from council?
I just want to reinforce the fact that I think some of us haven't had any idea just about how we've spent our parkland funds, and it would be very interesting to see what we've purchased and how we've built the parks up. I'm just reinforcing that I think that is something that would help us a lot on the operating and further in capital improvement project budget when it comes to trying to see how much more parkland we need. Everybody always wants green space everywhere they can find it, but we may not necessarily need green space everywhere we find it. So I think I concur. I think that's good.
Okay.
Good advice.
Thank you, Matt. Call for the vote on the Resolution 4719.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Fox? Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Staff comments. Dana, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council. Just a couple items that were in your informational packets. First, you have a memo in your packet from David Guion of the Dublin Arts Council. You might recall that for 2019, there were $25,000 were awarded for the 2019 Multicultural Bread Festival. The Arts Council is looking at doing something different than that, and just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I'd ask Dave if he wouldn't mind coming forward. I know the memo covers that. If you'd like to make any statement in the record, Dave, or if you have any questions of David about this change, and just an acknowledgement from council tonight as to whether you're okay with those funds being expended differently than for the Bread Festival.
Good evening. Thank you for your audience tonight. Appreciate it. The Dublin Arts Council is embarking on an art and wellness discovery series. Right now it consists of 2 events. One is a celebration for the 25th anniversary of Field of Corn. And so we have a lot of great things planned. We're working with the community directly on all of our programming. So we have the Washington Township Fire and EMS, who are in the audience tonight, Centero Counseling, Dublin City Schools Superintendent Dr. Hoadley, Justin Pice, the Dublin Police Chief, the Recreation Administrator, Molly Steiner of the city, Cardinal Health Community Relations, the Dublin Bridges, Ohio Dance, and others in the Human Resources Department at the City of Dublin. So again, as I said, there are 2 events, the celebration of Field of Corn, and then there's also an event called Flow, which will take place at the Dublin Arts Council. And it will include Tai Chi and yoga, a nature walk, all those things to do with wellness that are both mental, spiritual, and it's to bring the community together to talk about wellness in its largest form.
Okay. Any other questions for Dave?
I saw, did I understand correctly that this is about a $10,000 difference between, I think it was $25,000 for the bread, and this is around 15, or did I misread the dollars and cents on that? That it was a reduction, or did I read that wrong, Michelle?
I think at the end, David is noting that the city services related to this is 12 to 15,000, but he would anticipate using the full 25, and that's what's being requested. Is that correct?
Yeah,
For this,
that makes
okay.
sense. Yeah, because city services, we want to make sure that the police are available for every public event that we do, just in case there are issues.
I thought it a very interesting proposal, and I was hoping that there was some nickels in there, because I thought one of the useful things that might be to see if we can't get some measurement around this and some assessment around this, if there was funding to do that, because it's a good program, and it would be good to have some stats around how effective this is going into next year. So I was hoping there was a delta there to help fund that, because, or maybe that's already part of what you're.
It's already part,
Oh,
there's a
wonderful.
full evaluation component.
Okay, wonderful.
From an education standpoint, and also just an overall, so that it informs our programming for 2020. So it leads up to a 2020 program. So yeah, good question.
Great, thank you.
Jane?
I want to commend you because I know that the Arts Council is reevaluating their entire way of how they're approaching art.
Yes.
And one of the things that I know that we talked about was the incorporation of people to have an ownership or a participation in active art.
Right.
And I think this is a great step forward. Not only does it bring that together and it brings them to your site as well as the Field of Corn. It brings them to your site so they understand, appreciate that that's grounds for a place to learn about art, to feel good about art, to find wellness within art. And I think it's a great use of the money. I think
Great, thank you.
it's nice because you're asking the community to come and experience
That's
art. And I think that's where you're going to grow your art loyalists, really. So I'm really happy to see it go that way.
I agree, David. First, we have community policing. Now we have community arting.
There you go. We'll make it happen.
Nice analysis, Jane. Thank you very much. Do we need a resolution for this, a vote? Or
I think I'll just ask for a motion, if you don't mind, and pass that change that's being proposed by motion, just so we have that for the record.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I
please?
will move that.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Call
So
for
the-
question?
So the 25,000 is now
Yep.
reallocated. Just, Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Yeah, one other item in your packet was a letter from National Church Residences from Brittany Harris, who stated that she would not be able to serve on the Complete Count Committee, but would like to appoint Kim Yoder, Senior Program Service Coordinator for National Church Residents at Avondale, as her alternate. You may recall that council had previously appointed members to the Complete Count Committee for the 2020 census. And since you had done that, I'd just like to, for you to acknowledge also by motion that you would allow for Kim Yoder to serve as an alternate to Brittany Harris on that committee.
Okey-dokey.
I will move that Kim Yoder serves on the Complete Count Committee in place of Brittany Harris.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Dana,
That's all I
anything
have.
else?
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Is that, okay. Council committee reports, Community Development Committee, I think we've already reviewed this a number of times at 106 South High Street. That was the rehab down there. We've discussed it, and I guess it's been passed by the ARB. So is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox? And Mr. Reiner?
Yes. Next would be the Public Services Committee, headed up by Christine Aluto.
I'm actually going to
Christina?
turn it over to Donna, who's got a presentation.
Okay.
And Jane and John, you and I can have further discussion if we need to after Donna's presentation. Donna.
All right, good evening, members of council, and thank you for the opportunity to recap the proposed parking management pilot program. You'll recall that the city initiated a parking management study in 2016 with the new development that was occurring in the downtown area and the need to better manage our parking inventory. This study has been led by the divisions of planning with support from Public Works. I'd like to call special attention to Jeannie Willis and to Deviani Prionic for their really great work on this project. Thank you both. This slide shows you a brief timeline of the project process, including council engagement and how we've arrived to this point. And as described in the council packet, the Public Services Committee has reviewed the proposal and provided the following recommendations. For Bridge Park East, it's been a collaborative planning effort with Crawford Hoying. We've established the study area as illustrated in the map, which includes 66 parking spaces and 15 loading spaces for a total of 81 spaces in the pilot project. The next steps, as you see here, is to execute the contract with the vendor, collaborate with those stakeholders, work with them on community information and engagement strategies, deploy the signs and establish the branding strategy, put that schedule together with a completion date, and then develop the dashboards and analytics to collect the data and then measure the effectiveness of the pilot project. It's expected to last anywhere from 9 to 12 months. For historic Dublin on the west side, there's more work to be done there as we embark on any type of program for the historic district. The Public Services Committee has asked us to work through some steps to understand really the needs of that particular area. So we are to develop a survey for the historic district property owners and businesses to engage those folks in that discussion, then bring that back to the Public Services Committee for their review, their feedback and approval, and then re-engage with those property owners to really understand what it is that they're looking for to really define the scope of the parking pilot project for the west side. Well, those results will come back to the Public Services Committee to decide the next steps and how we'll move forward from there. For future considerations, there are a number of different policy discussions that will have to occur. I know it's easy to forget that it's only been 4 years since we've had any sort of parking structures available in Dublin whatsoever. So this is a new change. It's a significant change, and we really need to understand how these new resources are impacting how our businesses, our patrons of those businesses, and the visitors of the area really use them. So long-term, we'll have to understand how to manage parking and parking enforcement for the long term, and this data that we'll collect in these pilot projects will help us to really figure out how to manage both on-street and surface lot parking. With that, we have the recommendation of the Public Services Committee And staff requests authorization to proceed with the execution of a contract with Park Mobile for a parking management pilot project in Bridge Park East. We have representatives from Park Mobile here this evening, in addition to members of staff, to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions from council?
I know Jane's got some. Just really quickly, Donna, as sort of regardless of whether it's a 30-day or 90-day study, can you just talk about the process for bringing that back? Will it come to Public Services Committee? Will it come directly to council so that staff can receive direction on sort of a more permanent course forward or not, as the case may be, depending on what the data shows us?
Yeah, let me understand your question. Are you referring to the project in the historic district and how that will come forward?
No, really for both sides. Because if we do something even on the east side of the river and it comes back and the data just shows us at this point in time, we just don't need it, right? I want to be sure that we have an opportunity to say, wow, it's just not needed right now.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
So
that process of bringing it back.
Yeah, as the pilot project, and we kind of define the scope and really determine the length of time, we had talked about actually having a full calendar year as an idea that would be a good thing, because then we can get all the different weather elements in there to understand how people park on street versus the garage. So it may be a 12-month is what we go and decide to do, but that data will come back to the Public Services Committee to then develop those long-term strategies and decide how we're going to move forward with a recommendation of the committee.
Yeah, and that's fine. Again, it doesn't matter if it's 60, 90, whatever days it is. I just want to make sure that that kind of comes back through the process for that review and kind of the movement forward. And then I had emailed you about talking with Share to talk about what needs there might be in terms of ride share, of which there's sort of a type of ride share, that kind of thing. Will that be incorporated with all the feedback that you're collecting?
It will. Actually, we're trying to really look at the holistic picture with mobility and parking management. Devyani has been integral to that, again, with our public services team. And we're developing that full picture so that we understand how share is being used, certainly from the circulator that we have established with our senior group as well as our business group for the lunchtime shuttle. So we'll look at that in conjunction with the data that we collect from the parking management study.
If I may, real quick, just for point of clarification. So procedurally, I guess I just want to make sure all of council is, or the majority is okay with data being reported back on a periodic basis back to the committee. And then if there's any direction that should come out of that reporting or process of reporting back, that would then come back to full council. And I just want to make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music with that. That's probably what you said, but I just needed to make sure that was the.
Yeah, no, thanks for the clarification. That's exactly what I was talking about.
What data are we talking about?
The data that we'll collect during the study?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really about usage. So what we'll be able to ascertain through the Park Mobile app is how people are utilizing the on-street parking. Once the paid parking is implemented, that pilot is implemented in Bridge Park, we'll be able to collect the data from the folks that are using the app.
I would also add that there's other information to be collected relative to the historic Dublin as well, with the survey approach.
Yeah,
and the discussion with the folks in historic Dublin, which those results would need to be reported back to the Public Services Committee. They can then chew on that, talk about that. If there's direction or suggested direction as a result of that, would come back to this body.
So it'd be time of day, morning, noon, night, weekends, the whole thing. As you mentioned, weather events, how does that impact?
Yeah,
et cetera?
it's about the capacity that's available and the usage.
Yeah. I can see that.
So a couple questions that I'm just trying to understand. Do we have parking utilization numbers for the garage, how occupied they are? Do we know that data? Do we have that data?
No, we don't, and that's part of the project. I mean, we have some anecdotal information from Crawford Hoying, and they've been tracking it a little bit more on a more statistical basis, but certainly from the city lot, because it's not been open long enough, it's the game changer, so we need to establish a baseline.
So how will we collect that data as part of this study?
Do you want to speak to that?
So this pilot project is only for on-street parking, and idea is
So we
to
would-
quick turnover and push people to garages for long-term parking.
Again, one of the things that I hear over and over and over from people is one of the things they love about Bridge Park is free parking. I hear that consistently from people. And so I read in here that one of the concerns and one of the things vendors, retailers, restaurants want is to make sure that there's availability out front of their restaurant. I get that. That makes some sense to me. What I'm not understanding is why we couldn't get some type of metrics through some sort of smart sensors or something in the ground where we could measure time of day, movement, all of those things without forcing a payment model on here. Because I just worry that what we'll do with the unintended consequences is if we think it's paid on the street, well, I think it's paid in the garage as well. And I worry about that. So is there not a way to collect, and I agree it's valuable data and useful data, is there not a way with all the smart city stuff going on to not add that element in it? Because I'm concerned that it will have an unintended consequence.
I think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Crawford Hoying has done a lot of outreach to both their residences and their businesses there. They don't seem to share that concern. Like, they actually have the concern that the issue is that their on-street parking is not being used the way that it ought to be used. And that's of concern to both their residents and their businesses. And they do feel that having paid on-street parking, which would push people who don't want to pay into the free garages because they'll still remain free, but people who want to pay that premium would still be able to park in front of those restaurants. I guess what I'm saying is the people who are working and living down there every day seem to feel that this is an okay, they're kind of excited about it.
Christina, what I'm hearing here is we can move some people, and those that are willing to pay can park on the streets. If the concern is about frequent availability on the street, could we not do that with two-hour parking limits? Could we not do that with sensors? I'm just saying, could we not achieve that same goal, because that seems like a very useful goal, in a way that doesn't violate one of, I think, the greatest things about that is that free parking. I was at the market on Saturday, and I don't know how many times I overheard people say, isn't it great, the parking was easy, I can move, et cetera. So I'm just asking, is there not a way to accomplish this without that particular facet of it? Because I'm not seeing
so the issue
the economics of that.
Yeah, so the issue with the 2-hour parking is we didn't want to put a bunch of signs down there, and with 2-hour parking, you'd have to mark that somewhere on the street, right? And I think it would increase our enforcement hours there. So those were some of the issues that we didn't want to do that, was because, and I think council had this discussion about putting signs there. One of the reasons we didn't proceed with the parking meters earlier when they brought the big parking meter thing in was because we didn't want to put any equipment or signage in that area on the streets. So that was one of those reasons. And correct me if I'm wrong, that was just from my memory of that previous discussion.
There is time-limited parking already in this area. It's 2-hour parking limit. It's not possible to enforce it the way we can enforce the app with the enforcement technology. It exactly shows where people are parking. And for ParkMobile, there are 15 million customers who already have this app, so it's very widely used, including Columbus. So that's a great tool to test for pilot project and see if there is adaption, general adaption from people who are visiting the area. And
So why would it have to take a year to assess that?
To test it in all seasons, from holiday season to summer to spring to winter, and see if it's...
We don't have to, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So what is the cost of this pilot?
It's free.
So our vendor, ParkMobile, they are providing this pilot project for free, except for the sign installation, which will say that you have to download Dublin parking app, or people
So we
can
will
call.
have signage.
There are already signs. We will try to utilize same poles as much as possible.
So we will have signage, so we're not...
Yeah, we will have you're right, but they'll utilize what's already there in terms of the sign placement. They won't need additional poles in the ground for 2-hour parking.
I'd like to go back and just fundamentally answer your original question, and that is the application of smart technology in smart cities. So let me give you the answer to that, yes. And that's the short answer. The point here is we are leveraging a technology and a process that's been proven pretty broadly, and particularly on the east side of the river where you have one ownership of this, and I'm zooming up to 30,000 feet. I know the committee's had much more in detail conversation over this, but we're really looking at trying to get, movement on street on the east side of the river. That's the easier solution, if you will, and the applications and things that they can use are proven, and we're not reinventing a wheel. I do believe, this is Dana talking, that when it comes to the west side of the river in historic Dublin, we have such a mix of parking over there, be it on-street, surface lot, stuff that we provide as a city. Now there's the parking lot's been introduced, there's private parking spaces, so lots of other either proven technologies and processes that perhaps these folks have used could eventually be tried over there after we go through the survey process that's been asked for. Or we can apply any number of types of smart technologies there. I mean, we're already looking at monitoring of some of the surface parking lots just via camera and playing with some of the technologies that other companies are coming forward with and wanting to test. So the answer is we're into all that, and including sensors could be a possibility as well. So that's part of the Smart Cities initiatives as well to try to apply to this. So I guess and the bottom line is more information to come on that as those things become more available and ready to use.
Go ahead.
Well, I've been a critic of it. I mean, I'll be honest with you about 81 spaces being a pilot program, but I do understand and appreciate that Crawford Hoynes, being one owner, is looking for curbside management. One of the things that I was hoping would come up in the recommendation, and I thought we brought this up in public services, that it's a curbside management. Holistically, we have to look at curbside management, not just collecting data on parking. But I didn't see it in any of the intent here or the objectives, maybe vaguely referenced, but we were very strong on saying that if we're going to do this pilot program, we have to understand curbside use. There's no handicapped, I saw in here that they were going to leave handicapped and drop-off open, but they don't actually have handicap and drop-off over there. And so there's no real designation of some of these other curbside uses other than simple car parking.
But we intend to do that, I believe.
Right, but it wasn't really in the objectives. We were pretty clear in the Public Services Committee meeting.
We are going to do that.
Yeah, but I wanted,
I agree.
we
It
wanted
should be
not
written.
only
It should be
define that we wanted a holistic understanding of how curbside management over there was being worked, and also that I know that data is being collected, but I'm still vague on what kind of data we're looking for, the privacy of that data, who would be able to sell that data or use that data, and we don't really have a data privacy policy here in the city that I believe would give residents comfort. Now, this is in parking, a very benign thing. It's very benign. So collecting parking data is benign, but it opens the door to collecting all kinds of other data that smart cities will be doing. And I think that, that I'm looking at it from 30,000 feet too.
Right, yeah, and I agree with everything you said. Let's take that apart a little bit. So let's unpack that some. So the first thing around the designated parking spaces, if that's not clear in here and needs to be clarified, then let's do that, because I know that that's the intent, is to designate and include those kind of spaces. So that's done. If it's not written in here correctly, we'll make that change, and if you adopt this, we'll make sure that that's included. The other thing has to do with data collection. So can Park Mobile come up to the mic and talk about data collection? And then the other item to unpack and talk about is security on data. So let's have them address the types of data collected. Let's reiterate how you secure that and what you use it for. And then there's also a larger discussion that I'd remind all of council about cybersecurity in general and larger municipal policies around security of data as we deploy anything that's smart related. And I just want to assure you at staff level, we've had a lot of discussion about that, working with some of our regional agencies that we cooperate with on this type of data policy. So I don't want you to think that's lost on us. We are actively working and talking about that at staff level. Do I have the answers to that? No. Nor does a lot of the states. There's only 2 states in the United States that are actively working the issue of data security. The state of California and the state of Arkansas is out front from everything that I've been able to read on it and see in my professional literature. And I know Doug and I have talked about this as well, so our CIO. So, we're working the issue. I know we've had a lot of discussion at regional level with MORPC and others through the various task forces that are working down there on this issue as well. So with that, take it away.
Sure. Dave Holler from Park Mobile. So as far as the privacy of data, when you sign up in-app, which I would encourage you to do, you enter your email address and password to register. You agree to our terms and conditions. You can link out through the app or online to read through those. All you need to enter is a license plate and a payment method. So that's the data we collect. And as far as privacy and sharing or selling the data, Deviani mentioned we have 15 million users and growing. We're about to hit the 16 million mark. We work with cities all over the country, large cities like Columbus locally, Atlanta, Houston, New York City, the biggest cities in the country. And since we are consumer facing, and our entire business is parking payment transactions, we hold that user data very, very closely. The last thing we would do is share that data with third parties or sell it, because those consumers using our app are our entire business. So it's very important to us. We're PCI level 1 compliant. We have cybersecurity policies. So user data is a very, very important issue for us. So we understand the concern, but it's our largest concern as well.
And you'll be able to tell us at the end of it, what will you be able to tell us? How often a car parks there, what time the car parks there, if the same car parks there? What is?
It's mainly
kind of specific?
transactional data. So the data, the staff will be looking at our number of transactions per day in a particular zone. Our entire system is zone-based, so you may have a zone for each block face in Bridge Park, for example, and you'll be able to see how many transactions, what the revenue was, day over day, week over week, month over month. So revenue, transaction volume, things like that. Not how many times a vehicle parked, but how many vehicles actually parked in that day. Length of stay, you'll be able to see, are people paying for an hour, are they paying for 2 hours, information like that. It's transactional data.
Is it geolocated? I mean, how do you know where I'm getting a yes?
So in app, it's using your phone's GPS to show you zones that are close by. So the end user will be able to touch that zone in app or enter that zone number manually based on the signs they see in Bridge Park.
So if we had that geolocating, we could do this free of charge, could we not? Could you not have the map?
It's tied to our payments.
I mean, if they signed up, the requirement is to sign up, but there is no charge. I mean, is that not an option in this test?
No, because we're only collecting that transaction data if someone's paying for parking. We're not tracking if somebody has the app. We're looking at transactional data.
At a minimum, there's a transaction fee.
So Kathy, there is a way.
This is how this is being funded. So we are funding the transaction fee during this process?
No, the transaction fee goes to the consumer.
To the consumer.
So Kathy, just to tag on to that a little bit, there's a transaction fee and then whatever, it's $1 an hour or what have you. If a business decides that they want to waive all or a portion of that $1 per hour, the Park Mobile can provide a coupon. What do you call it?
Yeah, validation or promo code. So Bridge Park businesses will be able to provide validation codes to people who park, so they'd be able to offset the parking fees.
Is that part of the study to provide that?
It's an option that we could make available.
Again, I'm worried about the PR consequence. I'm worried about that we're going to end up in not the place that we want to be here. And it seems to me with all the technology that we have at our disposal that there's a way to do this without a yes and.
I think the one thing to keep in mind, too, is this is a I'll use the word, it's a beta test. We're testing for a period of time, and we're asking for cooperation, and we're trying to give voucher back. And I would also offer that there's probably a lot of people live in our city who have done this. If you go to park in parts of Columbus, I know I've just visited friends in Columbus in their neighborhood and have had to get the voucher code from them after I parked to put in my license plate number so I don't get ticketed if I park for more than a certain amount of time within their neighborhood. And I know more and more of this is in the short north and places like that. And if you travel outside of Dublin very much, you're going to be using these in D.C. and some of these other cities, which I know I'm no expert on it, but I've had to use. So I think it's become a little bit more familiar to people. But I also, it shouldn't be looked at as a punishment. We certainly don't want that kind of PR. We want this to be a way to try to understand how to work the area better. And I think what we're trying to do is rely on a company that's got national experience in doing this to help us walk through with minimal negativism about trying to figure out how to get this done. So,
I guess, Kathy, one of the things that, because I have trepidation about this process, so don't get me wrong in that regard. I think one of the things that gave me some confidence level is in our discussions is, staff's willingness in Campus Park. See how long I've worked on campus? That's my problem. And the parking app is that they have to come back, whether it's a 90-day pilot or 365-day pilot, whatever we decide that needs to be, they've got to come back and basically prove their case that this is something that's a good thing. There's a stopgap there, and that's us. We get to say no. If we decide that this did not work out the way we wanted it to, it didn't drive behavior the way we wanted it to, we get to say, no, we don't want to do this. We have that authority and we have that ultimate decision-making ability. And I do think that that's a critical piece of the equation. I want to go back to something that Jane said because I completely agree with her. We did talk about this really being a holistic sort of approach. So as we go through it, at some point we'll make a motion and vote. I want to be sure that we put that language in this so that all of council is aware that it is that more holistic approach in terms of handicap parking, in terms of ride share research and figuring out what that should look like. I want that to be very specific in the document as part of that text. Because I agree, we were pretty clear that we wanted to make sure that that was sort of out in front there. And I think you can put it in sort of the policy discussion, or maybe it's a smaller section outside of that, however you want to do it. But I do want that language in there.
Certain. We have started conversations with Share in terms of what are their drop-off spots. I had a call with Lyft representative as well. What I've heard from them so far is the scale of Bridge Park is not that large enough, so they can start discussions with us yet, but it's getting there. So they are very open and willing to discuss with us what those drop-off or pickup spots are more problematic. So we have started those engagements with Lyft, trying to get Uber online as well. So we are trying to collaborate with all rideshare companies as well as.
And that's great. I
Yeah.
just want it noted in whatever text that we
Certainly,
we pass.
we can incorporate that there. And we obviously look at the spaces and how they're designated for loading zones, other handicap spots, and that's something that we'll continue to research. And obviously, the data, as we understand what spaces are being used the most, will help us to understand where those need to be located.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for the Park Mobile representative? Anything else? No? Well, thank you. Thanks for stopping in. Okay, any other discussion?
Yeah, I understand that Crawford Hoyne and Bridge Park want to manage their curbs. I get this. I guess what I'm very interested in, we'll get data back, but I'm wondering about the data that is not described here that might drive business away. The Short North, if you read some of the articles over the past year, as they initiated their Parkmobile project, I don't know if it was Parkmobile, but in some of the parking projects down there, many people, and it's been written in the dispatch, that people felt that they didn't want to come because of the of the time it took to find a place to park using a park app. And I get it if we had 2,000 spaces, but we have 81 spaces, and we're going to have to put up more signage, create more time to go to the curb. If the data is that important, then also what's important is trying to figure out somehow whether or not this is going to drive business away or become a problem. Like Kathy said, if you have a Saturday morning and it's free parking and people go there and go, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden it's not free parking, and they don't understand or appreciate that they have to move into and you get people that are angry, what good have we done this new urban area that where everybody's excited about going? I just worry about the feedback we're going to get on this, on paid parking for 81 spaces.
By the businesses?
I mean, it's just, and then also, I think it wasn't mentioned in here, in the historic district, we have a valet parking problem that we need to address, because we are going to get the Pearl, and we have the Avenue, and we don't have much space there for valet, yet we have parking across the street at the library where people park, which could be valet. Those are all things that are simple to fix. We need to look at ways that we can do this without using a parking app. We can just move around some parking spaces. We've got to open up some spaces for the Pearl. We've got 3 restaurants with 4 valet spaces and it stops all the traffic going north. I'm struggling. I mean, I really want to, I buy into the smart cities thing. I'm struggling with this.
You know, I don't understand why there's so much angst over the curbside. I'm down there all the time on the east side, and I go in the parking garage. It's easier.
Right.
And walk across the street to whatever restaurant or office that you want to go to. So I don't get the angst there, and certainly out on Riverside Drive, once in a while I'll park there, you get the car pointed in the right direction, and off you go. On the west side, it's the same thing, though. I don't look for a parking space out there. I go into the garage and I get my ticket validated, and there's no charge.
But I think part of this, Mike, is you live here, right? And so from visitors and people that are coming for the first time and they see paid on the street, they don't know the garages are free.
I don't recall a time when I've been able to even find a space in Bridge Park, lunchtime or dinner time on the street. So I'm not even really sure why we think we're going to help people when they can just go across the street and park in the garage.
So
If it's important.
If it's going to remain full, then what value are we bringing the businesses by paying it? If it's going to remain full regardless, what value are we bringing?
But part of the reason why it's full, though, Kathy, is because there are people that the businesses don't want parking there for longer periods of time. So the idea would be that they'd have to continue paying for half a day or however long they're there. Or they have some issues with construction, but it's not just them, it's also residents and things like that should be parking in the garages anyway. So the idea is to drive the behavior of those who are parked there for things other than a lunch or a dinner to the garage.
You know, that's true, because we had that whole problem with the south parking lot, and I had innumerable meetings over that, and we had workmen parking there, and then we had employees parking there all day, and then we had the restaurant folks saying, hey, there's no parking over here because there's full-time employees upstairs at the IT building, and there's a group over here, and they're taking up all our parking spaces. So what you said is true. The idea is to try to get them to move on, because, the fees are going to be onerous enough that they're going to want to not park on the street. And so in the morning, the early construction guys already are using up those parking spaces, and you just don't need all the help using those parking spaces when we really want them to turn over fairly rapidly to make it a viable area for dining and stuff. And I think that's what this experiment's about, to see if that really works. So,
And if it doesn't, we get to say no.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it feels not cohesive enough about what the objective is, what the current capacity is, what we're going to learn in 81 spaces. I'm having trouble from bullet
The
points.
objective is to really incentivize folks who are long-term parkers to park in the garage.
Then why not put 2-hour parking limit sign
The
in there?
limit is
Period.
already. The limit is already.
See, the challenge, see, the funny, the interesting thing about all, the interesting thing about all of this is years and years and years of people struggling with the lack of turnover of spaces. And they're 3 hours now. and you want to make them 2 hours, okay, well, it just makes, well, whatever it is. It's been 3 hours for a long, long time, and getting, the whole point of this is on the curb, getting the turnover.
Right.
And, you know, I hear this and have heard this for a long time. I continue to hear it from our businesses in historic Dublin about turnover of parking spaces. Because go talk to the ice cream shops. They want turnover. We still have issues with employees parking where they're not supposed to be all day long, and some of these issues still, they're better since the parking garage has gotten in, mind you. Business is up since that, I've been told. So there's a lot of goodness going on, but there's also, it's enforcement by someone going around and enforcing it physically, or you try to apply technology to see if you can enforce it. This is a test. I'm going to really dummy this down to Dana's level. This is really a test of trying to apply technology the way Dana looks at it. And maybe that's not the right way to look at it, so straighten me out if it's not the right way to look at it. But it's trying to apply technology in a way to achieve that same turnover that we would have to do probably with someone out there enforcing it. And so this has been talked about as a way for a long, long time. So I think we're just at a point where staff has studied it. We've brought all this information forward. We've done a couple generations of study on this, and we're just at a point where if you want to really assess and get after this turnover issue, this is what we're saying is the best approach. And let's start that in a geography that's pretty tight. And again, back to the one owner thing and all of that. I mean, that's how I look at it from, and maybe I'm oversimplifying. I apologize if I'm doing that. I put that in the terms that I look at it and having struggled with this turnover issue for so long. And I think that's just a great way to test it over there because it's easier than testing it over on the west side of the river.
So I guess we can beat this up all night long, but
That's right.
I would like to put a motion on the floor to authorize staff to proceed with the implementation of the mobile-only parking management system pilot program in Bridge Park East and engage Park Mobile as a technology partner for the pilot. That's a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Call the roll.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Rosa?
No.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
And Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion, the motion fails, so we will not go forward with, because we need 4 votes tonight, because we have 5 present. So we will not go forward with the program. So I guess I'm going to ask council for your direction on what we should do next. Should we do nothing? We'll just walk away from the entire parking management process? Is that the...
For me, again, I get the need. I think there is a big risk about unintended consequences here in this. What would give me positive feeling is come back, talk about the numbers, talk about the communication plan about the free, talk about how we could do vouchers. Help me understand how we're not going to have an unintended consequence about what is one of the things people are so jazzed about, free parking as new visitors, et cetera. To me, that would give me the comfort to say, okay, we really have an overall strategy plan here, and is there a way to do this simultaneous with those both things? I think in the smart technology world, there has the ability to do this. We have seen, as Jane said, very negative things come out of the short north, and I don't want to be painted with that brush because I think we could do it a bit better. I'd like to see some of the things that Christine mentioned incorporated in it. So to me, I guess what I'm asking for is just a more comprehensive way of how to do that. I'm not opposed to improving the curbside at all. I'm just saying I think there's a way to do that and not remove one of the greatest advantages we have right now. That's
I guess I need more clarity from the committee, from council on what
This
the
is what,
committee is.
let me please address this.
Okay.
So the issue that I have with what you've said is effectively you want us to bring the entire thing that they brought to the committee at the committee level, which even if Jane hadn't supported it at the time, had 2 people, therefore it went up to council with that recommendation, back to council so that we're effectively doing a full council presentation on everything that was brought to the Public Services Committee, which sort of, I guess, takes the whole...
Or at least a
takes-
written report that says it.
Please, let me finish. That sort of takes the whole purpose of bringing it to the committee level away from bringing it to the committee level, right? The idea is, at the committee level, we kind of go over this stuff ad nauseum sometimes, right, in big levels of detail, so that we don't have to have those deep levels of detailed discussion for every single thing that comes across us at the council level, because otherwise it's just all going to be all workshops all the time for all of council. And maybe that's the direction we want to go, I don't know. But if we have to bring everything that we do at the committee level all the way up to council all the time, there's no point in having the committee discussion. I'm not saying you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong, we're all allowed to disagree, and I respect your opinion, I truly do. You know, as I said before, I had some struggles with this. I felt confident about it because of what we discussed at the committee level, because, you know, staff was very willing to take our trepidation and put it to paper. The stuff that we talked about tonight, they were willing to put into, you know, the piece of paper that we were either going to pass or to fail, right? So they were willing to do that. We are the stopgap. We're the ones who get to say no if we don't like what's happening. So I felt very confident in that, and that is part of what gave me confidence, was the level of this discussion that we had at the committee level. We had phenomenal questions. Jane brought up all kinds of amazing stuff. John brought up stuff. I thought the discussion was incredibly rich. And I think that the minutes would reflect that the discussion, the two discussions we had were quite good discussions. So I guess I feel, I'm not sure what the right word is, but if the committee discussion is not good enough, then we shouldn't have it at the committee level if we're going to repeat it at the council level. So I guess what I'm asking is that what you'd like to do?
You know, I think that, well, there are no minutes of the Public Services Committee.
Yes, there are.
That were they published? Were they out here?
Right, they were added.
They were added, okay, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I feel that in the recommendations, what I'm missing is exactly what Kathy was talking about. I think that to do the pilot study is all right if it doesn't cost the city $90,000 or $100,000 to put up signs. We were told it was going to cost any money, and I don't know what code enforcement's going to cost, and I don't know what the signage is going to cost. But aside from that, I think what's really important is that we wanted a holistic overview of how to manage the curbside, and I don't really feel in these recommendations that is one of the primary objectives, which we set at Public Services.
But we just asked them to add that, and they said they would add it.
Right, so
what, I guess I'm still struggling. You're saying that's missing. We're saying, great, acknowledge, they should add it. They agreed to add it. So I guess I don't feel that that's an issue any longer, because it's been agreed that they need to add that language to what we're talking about here. And if that means we need to bring this back, then that's great. But to just turn it down flat so there's not an opportunity.
That would be my suggestion.
Doesn't feel
is
good.
that if we come back and we can see that this holistically looking at curbside use, that's a main objective, not only just getting data as to when they park. And the same thing with the historic district. Even though we're not putting in paid parking, we have some issues with valet parking, which we mentioned in Public Services, and it wasn't mentioned here. Some of those things are missing, and that would make it more palatable to me.
So we do know what the signs are going to cost. The initial signs are being provided by the company. That's been stated all along.
No, I think we're paying for the, are we?
No, we are paying for the installation of the signs.
sign.
They are paying for the signs.
So Dana, can we bring it back to the next meeting when we have a full council and have that discussion?
The discussion on the direction? Yeah, you can, if that's what
I mean,
the decision of this group
It seems to
is.
me that needs to happen with the full council as well. And
As staff, I would not initiate that. If y'all direct me to do that, then I'll do that.
And I would add the communication plan, and I don't see any language around the communication plan about free and vouchers and how we might be able to do, again, that, I don't see that in the plan.
So it seems to me that you're looking for the full-blown proposal at this moment, and
Sure,
we're
sure what
not
it sounds like.
there.
Well, then maybe that's, if, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking to see what the committee saw.
not.
So
Certainly not.
If it's all there, then it's an easy fix.
Well, it's not all there. That's the point. It's, we're looking at trying to engage this group, or not, so that we can leverage that experience and more fully develop the implementation. I think we tend to get a little ahead of the implementation side of things by assuming we're there. We're not there. This is one
pilot.
step towards getting there.
Yeah.
and now there's no step. So
Yeah, I don't get
Yeah,
it, really. I don't get it, guys, because this is the only way, this is a research project to find out where we're going, and if we kill the research project off before we even start it, what are we doing? I mean, we got to find out, and, you know.
But we can
and
research
all those
more
com-
than one thing, John.
I know, but all those comments, are valid comments and valid worries about, let's not drive away the business because of the parking garage situation is there. But, I mean, if we don't at least take this up, we went through this in the historic district years ago, and, we finally, I think, mitigated some of the problems with the people parking down there and tried to help out the businesses and the Starbucks and all those other guys who needed people to turn over, and they needed them to get in and get out. And we just ended up with a bunch of people parking there all day, ruining the entire effort and the expense that we put into that parking lot to make it work. And we had meetings after meetings after meetings down there. And this is an exploratory adventure to find out if this is a viable thing, and they're going to provide the information we need to make it work. And Christina said is, we went over all this as nauseum in the committee meeting, and now it's back to start again. I really don't get it. I mean, we got to step forward and try this to see what's going to happen. The historic district's protected by this particular motion, and I just don't get, why we want to do this all over again. I don't get it. I think it's a total waste of time, and these folks are providing the information we're going to need to know what our next move is. And we're knocking that block out from underneath us, so we're back to square one, and really with.
John, we're not saying we're back to square one. We're saying we don't have, I'd like to see what the communication plan is here, so we don't do that
Communication
on.
plan was provided
I didn't see it in there, sorry.
To Public Services.
to Public
Committee,
Services
yeah.
Committee.
Okay, well then, again, just, maybe it's just a matter of sharing that. Again, you
It's in the
you heard what the
It's in the
concern.
minutes,
You heard
yeah.
what the concern is.
Uh-huh.
So, again, to me, I'm not saying it should start at square one, John. I'm just saying, I think there's a couple important things that we should talk through before we say yes. That's all I'm saying.
Right, but the communication plan was already presented to Public Services Committee. It is in the minutes, it's all there. If that's not sufficient, then I think that's a discussion that needs to be had with staff, for sure. I agree with you, but I don't think that we know if it's sufficient, because I don't think everyone's read the minutes. That's no knock on anybody. Sometimes you don't get through all the minutes. It's a lot of material to read from every committee, no doubt about it. And I do feel like we've addressed some of the things that we've talked about with staff's willingness to change the text. So, maybe it's a matter of, and correct me if I'm not heading in the right direction, maybe it's a matter of we ask staff to go back and put the language that we've asked for into the text, pull out the communications plan from the previous presentations, and include that as an attachment or an appendix or whatever you want to call it to the text, and let's take a look at how that would look. If it's still not something that's palatable to you, then great, fine, no big deal, it is what it is. But given that it is, it's a pilot, it is a way for us to be able to determine what the data would tell us, I think it's a worthwhile experiment to do, and largely inexpensive to the city. The one owner wants it, so I feel like, we're trying to listen to what their desire is as well. And if there's still a strong desire to completely take, the historic district out of it, especially after we do the outreach that was promised to us, and we're brought back with that outreach is, we take them out of the pilot. That's been the thing the whole time, and that was a big concern that you and I both had.
Let's bring some conclusion to this.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to
Okay.
do. So is that approach the right approach for you?
I think it's a much better approach, because I think it's hard to mine the minutes.
Okay.
And look at the recommendations.
Donna?
And not
Do you
have
have
the whole
direction
thing.
then?
Donna, can you have direction, and can you have this ready for our next meeting, or is that?
Yeah, we can have it ready. As I said, the communications plan was already put together. That was part of the minutes. We can pull that out.
Yep.
We can change the language in the proposal to include that curbside management piece. However, it might not be part of this particular parking management program. Because the scope of this is a little bit different, that's something that we can do in tandem, and we do already in terms of monitoring how space is being used and how
It's just been a
designed.
few years ago, we had no parking. And
Right.
and so
Now we
this
have
is
too
kind of a
much.
first world problem, as I see it. We've got incredible parking facilities, and it's free. And so there's a handful of spaces that we want to manage for business. But honestly, there's thousands of spaces between all the garages, east and west, now, when we had nothing. And people were paying $5 and tip, you'd pay $7, $8, $9 to go to a restaurant because you didn't want to walk a half mile up the top of the hill and back. So I don't see this as onerous, and we continue to have free parking. The preponderance of parking is free. So let's go with that and
Thank
call
you.
a day on it,
I don't think
please.
we're going to rescind the votes, right?
No, it is
so
what it is, it's
let's-
done.
Let's wait, let's take this up on the September 24th.
Okay, so I want to
meeting.
clarify that what we're going to come back with is we're going to come back with pretty much the same thing we've already proposed, but we're going to add the curb usage on the east side, which we were going to do, but we'll make sure it's written so it's understood. Apologies if we didn't do that. And then the second thing is we will pull the communications plan out and incorporate that as well,
Yep.
and then resubmit this to you.
One more item, though. One more item, and Jane mentioned this, and this is really more of a staff thing. It's not necessarily part of the pilot program, but should be mentioned in the context of the pilot program, which is taking a look at the valet parking on the east side.
Right, and we
Again,
had
it's not,
pulled-
yeah.
Yeah, excuse me, because we had pulled the east side, the west.
Yes.
The historic, the west side, actually.
Sorry,
out
but
of
west
this,
side, I
so
do it
that
all the
We were
time.
really focusing on a motion to go forward with the contract for the east
Right.
side and come back.
Right, just in that
Everything to the
holistic
historic district.
sense.
So that's fine.
Yes, yes, you got it. That's it.
Okay, so but that's going to be part, just to clarify, that's going to be part of the West Side Historic
Yes.
Dublin process,
Right.
which is not part of the
Right.
That's right.
East Side contractual process
Right.
that
Correct.
we were proposing.
Okay,
Okay, one more public services, no committee, this has nothing to do with parking, I swear. We had our budget hearings this past week, and we went almost 4 hours. We got the material the day of the meetings, and so we have not had a chance to form a recommendation to all of council. So I apologize that that's the case. We just didn't have enough time and enough time to absorb and get our questions fully answered, although staff did a phenomenal job at answering the questions we had that night. Matt and I were here till like 10:15, so I appreciate that. Thank you. We will bring that back to the next Public Services Committee as an agenda item to discuss if we have any changes, tweaks, whatever we need to make for our recommendation to council. John or Jane, any notes on that? You
Nope.
guys, okay, thank you. Public Services is done.
okay, let's continue on with the council committee reports. P and Z, Jane?
I wasn't able to attend the September 5th p and Z, but p and Z reviewed the zoning code updates for Bridge Street and the historic design guidelines and boundary changes. Because I couldn't attend, I would once again ask, Dana, I think we talked about this, the possibility of videotaping some of the meetings because, the planning and zoning meetings, because we can't get the draft minutes because of the fact that there's a little delay. And so I couldn't personally catch up on what happened at the last meeting to make a report to council. So if there's a possibility to think about doing videotapings of meetings,
We have been, and that was in response to your council bringing that up before. I've asked our communication staff to take a look at the cost of that, and not that that's an issue. I mean,
Yeah.
and then the logistics, what might tie more back into the clerk's office. But from our perspective, extending our contract or what have you to do that should not be an issue, but we're exploring that.
I think it also helped council just to kind of see what the discussions are, which leads into the other suggestions. I had mentioned to commissioners that we would be getting together, and I don't know that we've set a date for council and the ARB and the planning and zoning get together and have a roundtable discussion. But this is an opportunity, that's one of the things that they're looking for as we discuss what we're interested in on council and what our policies are and what our visions are, that it gives them an opportunity to understand as they make their decisions to some background and some reference to it. So I hope that we get that set up at, I'd like to see us get together at least 3 times a year minimum, because I think it would be really helpful to commissioners. So that's what they talked about, and they're continuing to review those updates.
Administrative Committee, Mike or Jane, any comments on the Administrative Committee? Anything? Okay. Community Development Committee, I think I gave you a rather lengthy report on 3 or 4 different episodes of interest that we were working on last time. Finance Committee, Mike?
This, we have a meeting, Finance Committee budget meeting at 6 o'clock on this Wednesday.
Public Services Committee,
I'm
Christina?
pretty sure we beat that one to death tonight.
Central Ohio Transit Authority, Kathy?
Only one quick comment. The annual meeting is coming up the 3rd of October, and it really will be the kickoff of the new strategic plan, which really is a very far-sighted, very partner-specific plan, and I think it'll be a good event, so I encourage people to attend. Thank you.
Dublin Friendship Association, Christina?
Nothing this,
Let's see, Luke Regional Planning Committee, Kathy?
Nothing to report.
Northwest 33 Corridor Group,
We meet on October 11th. Thank you.
okay. Dublin Arts Council, we already had a interesting introduction from Dave on what's coming up. Dublin Board of Education, Christina?
nothing this,
Dublin Bridges Liaison, Jane?
No, there's a meeting coming up, but we haven't had one recently.
Okay. So that moves us to Roundtable. Mike, you want to start out tonight? Nothing? Christina?
I'm good tonight, thank you.
Jane?
I just want to mention that on September 5th, when I couldn't go to Planning and Zoning meeting, I went to a meeting with the 8 to 10 members of the Ballantrae HOA to discuss the roadway design for Shire Rings, which I think you may remember there was a lot of concern by the neighbors about the closing off of Shire Rings east-west. I want to compliment Megan and Michelle and the city manager's office and your staff, Megan, for the fabulous conversation that happened. We met at the Washington Township Firehouse over on Hard Road, and it's the Ballantrae residents and the leadership was really concerned about the roadway design. And at that large meeting we had about 3 weeks ago, they brought this up to the staff. Staff went back, they listened, they studied, they redesigned, they came back with a presentation that was very conversational, asked their opinions. The compliments that came after that meeting from that group that said that was the most collaborative and most respectful conversation they'd had with city, that they were so appreciative of it. I just think it was exemplary public service. I mean, it was citizen-centric. It was a big problem because the OSU project is important, and we want our residents to feel good about it, and the way that the staff and the city management handled their concerns was above, and it was just, you should write about it in an article. It was so good. I had to call Michelle and I had to email Megan because to the person, they said, oh my gosh, that was just great. So I just want to tell you that that was, it made me feel good walking out of there thinking that our staff had that kind of response to a resident's concerns. So right now, the road proposal is that it will be open east to west. They also addressed a dangerous intersection that was identified by the residents, which was Eiderman and Shire Rings, and they'll be putting a four-way stop as a temporary measure to try to stop some of the accidents there. I guess there were 17 within a certain period of time. And they asked them a consensus about an intersection or a roundabout, and of course, depending on traffic numbers, the consensus they would prefer a roundabout sooner than later. So it was just a really good discussion, and I just want to compliment you on it. So I think that you have a lot of support. They build a lot of public trust.
Anything else, Jane? Is that it? Catherine?
In a similar vein, I think it's the 5th North Pool meeting happened last week, or the 6th, and I know it has been a long process and many voices, and I would echo that at the end of that, many of the residents that I talked to, there was applause at the end, and many residents feel very engaged in that process. So the same thing, I thank the staff, and we know how much work that is and how many meetings that takes, but it goes a long way, and I think the residents are absolutely feeling they have a voice and a say. So thank you for that.
So I want to say Megan, you are a superstar. I had a chance to get on our bridge and walk across it, and an amazing engineering feat. And that's a lot longer walk than you really think it is. If you're crossing the 161 bridge, it's a pretty short jaunt, but with that S-curve in that thing, that's going to be quite the experience for a lot of people. And it will settle, the engineer said, another 18 inches once the next cement deck is poured on it. And it's just, it's a freestanding piece of art. It's just absolutely beautiful. And the engineer in charge of the project just said he couldn't be any more complimentary to our staff, everybody who works for us, you, Megan. I guess at one time you were his boss at ODOT. He said you were a superstar. They hated to lose you there, and now you're here with us, and just really, just amazing. Then an artist showed up who we brought into town from the Dublin Arts Council, and this is rather unusual. He said, your library is fantastic, and it just sets your whole town apart. And I go, well, that was quite controversial from certain people in a certain area. And he goes, no, you don't get it. I'm telling you, it's brilliant. I went up your street. He said, I got fresh eyes. I've not seen your town before. That library is fantastic. The inside is wonderful. And I said, oh, really? And he said, let me tell you, you guys look so progressive, so smart, so cool. And I said, why? Why are we all those things? He said, many towns did what you didn't do. They incorporated a library structure that looks like their architecture. He said, that is so passé. He said, it was gone the day it was finished. You guys did something really novel and exciting with your library. Well, I hated to admit it to the guy, but, we didn't really have control over library architecture because it was really a Franklin County library. We had some say, but, so anyway, it was a very interesting comment from a very famous individual who's an artist and has installations all over America. So something different being heard here. So is there any other comments before the good? And I just want to say, our friends at Washington Township, do you have anything to say? I didn't mean to skip you. No, everything's cool in the township? God bless you. All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming.